I'm Haley B. Miller, and this is Ohio Politics Explained, a podcast where you give us 15 minutes and we give you all the news you need to sound smart and impress your friends.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Ohio Politics Explained, looking at the political news of the week here in Ohio. Joining me today is State Bureau reporter Laura Bischoff. Hey, Laura.
Hi, Anthony.
How's it going?
Pretty good.
The first topic we wanted to talk about today is President Trump this week called for an end to the CHIPS Act, which could have a huge impact here in Ohio because of the Intel development. President Trump made the remarks during his speech to Congress on Tuesday. The president said Congress should get rid of the CHIPS Act, which would end federal support for the massive $28 billion Intel project in New Albany, near Columbus, and other microchip plants in the United States. Laura, new Ohio Senator John Husted is a big supporter of the CHIPS Act, and when asked to respond to the president's comments, Husted said, he continued to support the legislation and said it would likely be preserved. What's going on with this?
Well, let's recall that, Governor Mike DeWine and then Lieutenant Governor John Husted landed the Intel project for New Albany a couple years ago. And, this is a big win for Ohio. Massive project, huge investment, lots and lots of jobs. And it relied heavily on the passage of the CHIPS Act, which provides subsidies for onshoring manufacturing of computer chips in the U.S. And they consider, a lot of the supporters consider it a matter of national security. And we heard that from John Husted when President Trump said, let's get rid of he advised the lawmakers, you should get rid of the CHIPS Act. And John Husted pushed back a little bit and said, I'm confident bipartisan support remains for this. And for economic and national security reasons, we need to move forward with this.
Yeah, Senate leaders apparently told Politico today that Trump's request was new to them, and they're not putting a high priority on following the president's direction on this one.
On the campaign trail, Donald Trump was not a fan of the CHIPS Act, maybe in part because it was something that was supported by his opponent, Joe Biden. But, it's considered a crucial element to the success of this project, which is already a little bit tenuous. They've delayed the opening of the first fab, the first manufacturing pod, and then delayed opening of the second one as well.
Yeah, and, President Biden mentioned the Intel development in two of his State of the Union speeches and was here for that groundbreaking. It has been a very high priority project for the state of Ohio. Intel has received $2.2 billion so far of the nearly $8 billion in funding as part of the program. So there's still a lot of money on the table.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because, Donald Trump with his the way he's deploying all the tariffs and threats of tariffs, I think a long-term goal of his moves is to force companies to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. And so to then say we don't like the CHIPS Act is contrary to the effort to onshore or to bring back to the U.S. manufacturing.
Our second topic is Ohio's recreational marijuana program is likely going to go through some changes here soon. Ohio lawmakers are planning to kind of overhaul the recreational program that voters approved in 2023. Some lawmakers are going as far as to say the public really didn't know what it was voting on when they voted on it. And so they're looking to decrease the number of plants people can grow at home from 12 to 6, which some Republicans, especially in rural areas, fought last session to save. The Senate plan would also prohibit people from gifting homegrown marijuana and would only allow smoking and vaping in private residences, which if you've walked around Columbus or Cincinnati or most Ohio cities, you can smell that isn't happening. The bill also eliminates the social equity program. Laura, what would that program have done?
Well, it's designed to help people who historically have been harmed by the criminalization of marijuana to help them, get a stake in the business and as a legal entity. It's interesting. I think that the overall takeaway on this is that the Republican lawmakers didn't want to have legalized marijuana in the first place. It went to the ballot. The voters approved what they approved by a pretty substantial margin. And now you see the lawmakers chipping away at it. It is sort of a case of, are they ignoring the will of the voters, which is always dicey for politicians to do.
One of the things that is interesting is, the marijuana law passed in a lot of red counties, in a lot of Trump counties, a lot of rural areas where these lawmakers are from. And one of the things that was in that social equity program was, making it more open to smaller businesses to get in the game, especially in the more Appalachian region of the state. Getting to the big dispensaries is a bit of a challenge. So the home grow issue was a bigger issue for them. So it's going to be interesting to see if Republicans get on one page on this, because they haven't been before.
That's right. And, I think, again, there's among the Republicans in office, there's been a real resistance to legalizing marijuana, and they've kind of come along kicking and screaming.
The House is introducing its version of marijuana reforms actually today, so we will likely have an update on that in next week's episode. Our third topic, cuts to diversity, inclusion, equity and inclusion programs on college campuses have been in headlines across the country lately, and here in Ohio. Just hours after he took the oath of office, President Trump began issuing executive orders to dismantle these DEI programs. And he mentioned it again during his address to Congress, calling DEI a tyranny and saying, our country will be woke no more. Hundreds of Ohio State students, faculty, and staff protested Tuesday against the university's closure of its DEI offices, and also protested Ohio Senate Bill 1, this controversial higher education bill working its way through the State House. Laura, where do things stand with this?
Well, again, I think that a lot of the universities are closing their programs and offices to preemptively comply with executive orders from President Trump and also the anticipated passage of Senate Bill 1. I think that they're worried about financial penalties that the federal government and the state government could withhold grant money or other funding sources if they don't comply. This is not going over very well with a lot of students and alumni. There's been protests on college campuses. There was one at Ohio State recently. And, it puts the university trustees and administration in kind of a tough spot because it's what the state and the federal Republican leaders want doesn't necessarily line up with what students want. And, these programs of diversity, equity, and inclusion, historically they've helped groups of people who typically have a hard time accessing a path to college and staying in college, like first-generation college students, veterans, people with disabilities, Black students. So, this is going to impact a broad swath of people.
Yeah. And, a wave of these initiatives swept through the federal government and corporations after the George Floyd 2020 murder got national attention. But a lot of these colleges like Ohio State have had these programs for decades.
Yeah, absolutely. This is not something that just popped up in the last 5 years. This has been a long-term focus for campuses.
Our next topic is Ohio's governor race, which is, more than a year away, but it's getting a lot of attention already. Key Republicans are lining up early behind Vivek Ramaswamy, obviously to put pressure on Attorney General Dave Yost to drop out of the race and clear the path for him. Ramaswamy is a billionaire entrepreneur from Cincinnati who now lives in suburban Columbus and has never held public office. He did run for president in 2024 in the primary, but he's landed big endorsements just now this week. He got the endorsement from Aaron Baer, the president of the Center for Christian Virtue, which carries a lot of weight in Republican circles. He got President Trump's endorsement the day he announced. But other state office holders like Secretary of State Frank LaRose and Treasurer Robert Sprague also endorsed Ramaswamy over their fellow statewide office holder Yost.
Yeah, I have a one-word explanation for this. It's Trump.
Yeah.
The president's Donald Trump's endorsement in Republican primaries is extremely powerful. It has put Republicans into office. The lack of it has blocked Republicans from winning elections. And so I think that's what's going on here. Vivek Ramaswamy is probably less conservative on abortion than Dave Yost is. And I would say that abortion and K-12 and LGBTQ issues are sort of the central focuses of Center for Christian Virtue, which is a nonprofit group that has gained a lot of clout in the past decade or so as a preeminent lobbying group in the legislature. It is
interesting to have a Christian organization to endorse a Hindu for governor.
Right. And Vivek Ramaswamy actually made a crack about that when I think he spoke at a CCV event.
Yeah. Laura, you've been working for months on an investigation into Ohio's dog laws that is really fascinating, and readers will find it online and in the newspaper starting this Sunday. Tell us more about that.
So roughly 17,000 dog bites are reported across Ohio each year, and that's a gross undercount of what's actually happening because so many people don't report dog bites. And some of the attacks are so severe that victims suffer life-altering injuries, amputations, disfigurement, long-lasting psychological trauma, huge medical bills. We spent 8 months investigating these attacks and looking at weaknesses in Ohio's dog laws, and the full report is going to launch on Sunday.
Great work. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you all next week.